This meeting is being recorded.
Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to our program, our course on Nectar of Devotion, which is a summary study authored by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Today we will be beginning our study on chapter number 5 and chapter number 6 of this book. Chapter number 5 is titled as The Purity of Devotional Service, and chapter number 6 is titled as How to Discharge Devotional Service. So today is our 8th class on this topic, and we will like to invite now Rakesh Prabhuji for reciting Mangalacharan prayers. Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Om Agyantimirandasya Gyananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupaha Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruho Shri Utapada Kamalam Shri Gurunu Vaishnavansya Shri Rupam Sagrayatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam साद्वैतम सावधूतम परिजन सहितम कृष्ण चैतन्य देवम श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सहगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
धन्यवाद प्रभु जी, धन्यवाद प्रभु जी। बहुत अच्छा आपने उच्चारण किया मंगलाचरण प्रार्थनाओं का। वेरी वेरी थैंक्स। Now we move to the next item of our program, and that is summary of class number 7. And I would like to invite Dr. Ishwar Singh from Rohtak, who had already sent us a very enlightening summary of previous class. Prabhuji, please can you help us take us through the summary of previous class?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji,
Hare
Hare Krishna dear devotees. I am glad and thankful for being given an opportunity to summarize the contents of class 7 of Nectar of Devotion, which covers chapter 3 and 4. I am also utilizing this opportunity to express my personal gratitude as well as collective gratitude from the devotee side also to you, Prabhuji, for your very sincere efforts in simplifying the Nectar of Devotion contents for our classes for purposes of clarity and conception. This is really remarkable. You are really good at your efforts with a lot of time and patience. Thank you really very, very much. Now
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Coming to the task proper for this evening, that is summarizing class 7. I would say that having been adequately instructed on the definitions, the characteristics, types of Uttama Bhakti, their main distinguishing features, chief principle, and the scope of Vedi Sadhana Bhakti, which fell under chapter 2, we are now really poised to know more about Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. And in chapter 3 and 4, we are precisely going to know number one, about the eligibility of a candidate for accepting devotional service. And second is devotional service surpasses all liberations. This actually falls in both the chapters 3 and 4. Now, taking first of all, let us know if there is any prerequisite or qualification for Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. The answer is no, there is no such requirement, not even the need of knowledge and any detachment. Devotional service, dear devotees, is causeless. Any fortunate person who happens to associate with the genuine devotees and gets attracted to serve Krishna, or through the mercy of a bona fide guru or Krishna himself gets the bhakti seed, which hitherto had been lying dormant due to our ignorance. So anyone who develops faith in hearing and chanting of Lord's glories, neither too disgusted nor too attached to material life, can achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to God. This is amply confirmed in verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, and further on this, Jiva Goswami commentary also lends credence to this fact that a devotee who worships the Lord with great faith and conviction, even though sometimes he may be engaged in sense enjoyment, can make steady progress if he sincerely repents and compensates adequately on hearing and chanting of Lord glories. Now, one more thing we would like to take up next is renunciation a prerequisite? Though the general belief is that renunciation or vairagya facilitates spiritual life, but it is not true. It is definitely not required to begin bhakti. In fact, too much of it can be an impediment to bhakti, as bhakti entails use of our senses and emotions. Further, we take up the types or classes of devotees. We already know that there are three types of devotees or adhikaris: Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanishta. The differentiation between these three classes of devotees is primarily based on the quantum of faith and knowledge they possess in the relevant scriptures, and as actions in Vedi Bhakti are inspired by the teachings of scriptures. So knowledge of scripture is really very, very vital in this field. An Uttama devotee, therefore, is one whose faith is very strong, who is fully convinced and has the capacity to convince others. He is thoroughly knowledgeable and can defeat a counter opinion if it comes to him. A Madhyama Adhikari, his devotee is also pretty well convinced and strong in faith. He possesses good knowledge but can't always defeat the opposing opinion. Whereas a Kanishta Adhikari is poorly equipped or wavering in his faith and knowledge, and thus gets easily swayed in the face of opposing opinion. Incidentally, we should also know what we mean by faith of a devotee. And faith of a devotee here, we mean that the devotee must be convinced once and for all that goal of life is to please Krishna, and he should be ready to abandon all other desires. Now, next we take up the further classification or divisions of neophytes or the Kanishta Adhikaris. There is a class of devotees even below the Kanishta Adhikaris. They are called Sukritnas. Sukritnas, these are the people who represent a state prior to pure bhakti. It is also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 16. There are four types of Sukritnas. Arthas are distressed lot, then Artharthis are wealth seekers, Jigyasus are an inquisitive lot, and Gyanis are wise people. Now, all these Sukritnas represent a class of jivas who have done or are doing pious acts. Sukriti is nothing else but pious acts. So that is why they get this name, Sukritnas. And besides having luck for associating with devotees, that inspires bhakti. And perhaps this is the best Sukriti one can have for advancing in devotional service. As a corollary to this association and pious acts, such people can also eradicate their low tendencies and become qualified for pure bhakti in the company of pure devotees. And the examples are Gajendra, Dhruva, Naimisharya, sages, and four Kumaras. Now, out of these four Sukritis, the first three are representative of material platform. Hence, they are lower on the scale, and they can become jnanis only after many births and attain Krishna through devotee association. But this situation is not so easy. In fact, it is very, very rare, and only fortunate ones get this opportunity. However, the fourth type of Sukritana represented by Jnanis is the best one in this series. They are wise due to the study of scriptures. They know their identity as spiritual beings. They know their eternal relationship with God Almighty. Also knowledgeable about the potencies and personal nature of the Lord, and thereby they are able to brighten their eligibility to advance on the path of spiritual ladder. Although some of them among them may still be attracted towards impersonal liberation, which is counterproductive. Now, in addition to this, we have neophytes or beginners who can be considered as the fifth example of developing Vedi Bhakti. This example is of a step-by-step advancement on spiritual ladder, and this is possible through attaining knowledge and devotion by the mercy of devotees known as Bhaktivedantas. They are holy men, knowledgeable men who can impart such a training. Now, this example is very well exemplified by Narada Muni, who in his previous life was a Dasi Putra, who happened to serve these such holy men with devotion and learned the nuances of pure bhakti from an early stage and from a very close quarter. Next, we take up the next subject which emerges from chapter 3 and 4, and that is Bhakti surpasses Mukti. That is part of chapter 3 and paragraph 14 to 20. And chapter 4 is full on this. Both Bhakti and Mukti are called witches of devotional service, as they represent the force of possessing the devotee in his run up to realizing God. They are potentially significant to stop him in his tracks where, when present in his heart. These are very dangerous traits. Bhakti covers the desire for bhakti with material longings, while mukti denotes a self-centered approach to become one with God. Mind you, purity with God is unthinkable and undesirable, to say the least. Their approach, even if such people may have achieved freedom from material anxiety, but still, if they have these tendency of having parity with the Almighty, it's not going to work. Definitely does not work. The true devotees Therefore, do not desire liberation or mukti at all, as their minds and senses are well captivated by the process of bhakti, such as hearing and chanting about Krishna's qualities through the influence of prema. They get fully absorbed in the bliss of service to the lotus feet of Krishna uh, only. Now, talking about the contents of chapter 4 of Nectar of Devotion, uh, I would say that this chapter also highlights and exemplifies similar sentiments expressed by pure devotees in the matter of negating liberation. Chapter 4 is replete with many popular verses, references, and examples of great devotees. And the best one among them, of course, is Lord Hanuman, whose desire was to remain a servant to Lord Rama forever. He never wanted equation or betterment in his status. And with this last remarks, I come to the end of this recap and hope that most of the points stand covered. If there are some omissions, I would like Prabhuji to fill up the gaps and make it complete. Thank you very, very much for all of you for your patient hearing. Thank you very much indeed. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ishwar Prabhuji. Thank you very much for the very nice recap of this class 7. And it was not so simple, I can tell you, because some of these concepts were a little difficult, specifically the concept of the adhikaris and the sukritinas. And I would like to make a small correction what you presented today when relating between adhikaris and sukritinas. So if I recall correctly, you defined sukritinas as different type of neophytes, kanishthas. So actually, sukritinas are lower than the kanishthas. Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanishtha. These are the three adhikaris of Uttama Bhakti or Vedi Bhakti. But lower than the Kanishtha are the Sukritinas. So they are Sukritinas are not different type of Kanishthas, but they are below the level of Kanishtha. And among these Sukritinas, Artha means one who is distressed, Dukhi. Artharthi means who seeks for earth or wealth. And Jigyasu means who looks for some deeper happiness just beyond Artha or beyond wealth. So all Artha, Artharthi, and Jigyasu are on the material platform. And if you remember, the definition of Uttam Bhakti that we discussed, it was Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. So Anya Abhilashita Shunyam means any material desire, it should be Shunya, it should be zero. So Artha has a material desire of getting relieved from distress. Artharthi has a desire for wealth. And Jigyasu has material desire for some deeper pleasure and happiness. So all three are out from the purview of pure devotional service.
Right.
So Kanishta is still in the purview of pure devotional service because his intention is not Artha, Artharthi, or Jigyasa. His intention is clear. His intention is that uh, uh, I only need the service of the Lord. That's what his intention is. So intention wise, Artha, Artharthi, and Jigyasu are out. Now, why Jnani is also lower than Kanishta? Because Jnani is little bit attracted towards impersonal liberation. He may know theoretically that Lord Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. There is a personal form of the Lord. Uh, he may know all those things, but in their heart, they are still attracted towards impersonal liberation. So that is why, although the Jnani's motivation is beyond material, but since they are attracted towards impersonal liberation, they are still below Kanishta. So Artha, Artharthi, Jigyasu, and Jnani are all below Kanishta. However, Jnani is the best of these four because their intention is spiritual. Their intention is mainly directed towards the Lord. So that is why he's the best of them. And Artha Artharthi Jigyasu, after several lifetime of practice of the impure bhakti that they practice, they tend to become jnani, or they tend to get elevated at the level of jnani. And when the jnani actually comes in contact with a devotee, then the jnani becomes qualified for pure devotional service. So that's how the process goes.
Right,
I
right.
hope
Thank
I hope the
you.
process gets cleared now.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
that is good.
And
So we need to know these subtle differences between adhikaris and the sukritinas. Anyway, that was very good attempt, and I really appreciate uh, all very good attempt by Dr. Prabhu. And let me now move to the next part of our class. So, like we do a little recap of the structure of the book. There are few devotees who have joined us fresh today. As far as I remember, Nandikishore Prabhu is joining us for the first time. So, Bhaktir Samrat Sindhu has four divisions: East, West, North, and South. We are primarily studying Eastern division. Uh, that's what we are covering. And in the Eastern division, the number of chapters in the book called Nectar of Devotion are total 19 chapters. Till those chapters we are going to study in this course. And you can see there are further classification of chapters in each division. So like I said, we are only focusing on the Eastern division in this course. We are not following Southern, Western, and Northern, but these are the names of the chapters, or names of the waves or different chapters in the other divisions. But in Eastern division, what we are going to do, we are studying Samanya Bhakti. We have already covered that part, Samanya Bhakti. We have already written a quiz also on that part. What we are doing right now is Sadhana Bhakti, and that is where the most of these 19 chapters will dedicate our study. So Sadhana Bhakti, I think it starts from chapter number 2, and it continues as long as I think chapter number 15, if I'm correct. We will see that. And then we have couple of chapters on Bhav Bhakti, and then we have a chapter or two on Prema Bhakti. So uh, so these are the details of chapter number 2, what we are studying now in Bhaktir Samrat Sindhu. So we will not cover those things now, but just to give you an idea where we are on. So we are now studying Vedi Sadhana Bhakti, and you can see it's a very long list. It goes from verse number 6 to 269. So almost 263 verses we are studying in Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. Now, what we have done so far is we have covered this part, verse number 1 to 5. We have covered first three bullets. Now, we have covered first three bullets. Today in this class, we are going to study duties of Vedi Bhakta and 64 limbs of Vedi Bhakti. So we are going to cover the list only. We will elaborate on the list in coming classes. So that's where we will be focusing on. Now, uh, as you know, actually the course we are doing is Nectar of Devotion, which is a summary study written by Srila Prabhupada. So today we are studying chapter number 5 and chapter number 6. Prabhupada has titled chapter number 5 as the purity of devotional service, and I will explain what does purity means in the coming class in short while, and then how to discharge devotional service. Now, many of you have been giving me this feedback that it's a little technical book, Nectar of Devotion, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, lot of definition, lot of technical jargons are there. Indeed, there are definitions and technicalities in the book. But now from chapter 6 onwards, you will find a lot of practical things which you can very easily relate with. So it starts from how to discharge devotional service, and then it continues uh, till chapter number 13. So you see chapter number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So eighth chapters are all how to discharge devotional service practically. So far we have been focusing more on uh, devotional service, different type of devotional services, definitions of devotional services, qualities of characteristics of devotional services, and so on. So those details we have been focusing on. which is more of a technical part. But now from chapter 6 onwards, how to discharge devotional service, practically what need to do, what exactly in nutshell, in terms of activities, practical actions, what are we supposed to do, that is all covered starting from chapter 6 till chapter 14. So uh, for next coming 5-6 classes, you can be rest assured that the topic will be very very practical and very very useful for you also to understand what does bhakti means in practical terms. And then chapter 15 is about uh, bhava bhakti, 15th and 16th. And chapter number 17, sorry, chapter 15 and 16 is about raga nuga bhakti. That is still under sadhana bhakti, but that is raga nuga bhakti. Then chapter 17 is about bhav bhakti. Chapter 18 is also about bhav bhakti, and chapter 19 is about prema bhakti. So like you see here, uh, uh, till where we see chapter number 2, we are still talking about sadhan bhakti. Now what I have done in this slide is I have given you a little more graphical picture of what we have covered so far. And I will try to 5 minutes of small recap and try to stress upon some very relevant important aspects so that your confusion is not there, you are not confused, you are actually more clear on what we are doing. So as we started our discussion in Bhakti Samrat Sindhu and Nectar of Devotion study, we are talking about Uttam Bhakti. And in Uttam Bhakti, we have studied one definition. And that definition is Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Gyan Karmadi Anavritam Anukulyanna Krishnanu Anushilanam Bhaktir Uttama. That definition we have studied. We have studied elaborate uh, uh, in elaborate discussions we have had already on this definition, where we have discussed each and every component of this Anya Abhilashita Shunyam definition. So we understand Uttama Bhakti, we understand Uttama Bhakti definition. Then we go further, starting from chapter 2, we start to understand that Uttama Bhakti can be classified as Sadhan Bhakti, Bhav Bhakti, and Prema Bhakti. Sadhan, Bhav, and Prem. We discussed what is meant by Sadhan, what is meant by Bhav, and what is meant by Prem. So briefly we discussed about them. But for Sadhan Bhakti, we discussed in detail definition of Sadhan Bhakti. So I will like to remind you the definition of Sadhan Bhakti. Now Sadhan means what? Sadhan means some means, some ways and means to practice something. So sadhan means, the definition actually for sadhan bhakti means we utilize our senses and mind. We utilize our mind and our senses. Senses are 10 senses, 5 knowledge acquiring senses and 5 uh, action, 5 working senses. So knowledge senses are ear, nose, tongue, uh, and then uh, uh, ear, nose, tongue, and then our skin, sense of touch. Like that, we have 5 senses. Then working senses, we have hands, legs, speech, and 2 genitals. So those are working senses. So engaging our senses in doing some service. What does it mean? In Uttama Bhakti definition, we understood what is Uttama Bhakti. It is Anushilanam. Anushilanam means doing some activity for Krishna under the guidance of some guru, some scripture like that. So that is Uttama Bhakti, doing some activity. Sadhan Bhakti tells us uh, that we do those activities with some sadhan. With some sadhan means with our senses. Senses are our knowledge acquiring senses and our working senses. So what I would suggest is that you remember the word sadhan, and then if you understand the word sadhan, then you can easily remember the definition of sadhan bhakti. Sadhan bhakti means engaging our senses and our mind in doing some service. And from where this service is coming? This service is coming from the word shilanam, anushilanam in Uttama Bhakti. So Uttama Bhakti tells us it is Anushilanam. Sadhan Bhakti tells us that how we need to do that Anushilanam using our senses and using our mind. So that is Sadhan Bhakti. Then We are not discussing Bhava Bhakti and Prem Bhakti right now. We will discuss Bhava Bhakti in chapter number 17 and 18, and we will discuss Prema Bhakti in chapter number 19. So that is for later. But so far, Uttam Bhakti and Sadhan Bhakti, two we have done so far definition. Then we further classified Sadhan Bhakti into Vaidhi Sadhana, Vaidhi Sadhan, and Raganuga Sadhan. Now, we are still not discussing Raganuga Sadhan. We will discuss these Raganuga Sadhan in chapter number 15 and 16. So, till then, you forget about Raganuga Sadhan. You only remember Vedhi. Now, the word Vedhi comes from word Vidhi. Vidhi means rules and regulations. So, rules and regulations are written where? Rules and regulations are written in scriptures. So, Vedhi Sadhan means we do bhakti following the rules and regulation in scriptures. So, for the time being, if you remember these three definitions, Uttam Bhakti, Sadhan Bhakti, and Vedi Bhakti, then we are good. That much if you understand, then we are good. How to remember Sadhan Bhakti? You remember the word Sadhan. Sadhan in English would mean means and ways. So, what are the means and ways? Means and ways are engaging our senses and engaging our mind in the in bhakti. And one way of engaging our mind and senses is by following rules and regulation, and that is where comes Vedhi. The word Vedhi comes from Vidhi. Vidhi means rules and regulation. So, in the definition of Vedhi, you need to emphasize upon rules and regulation. In the definition of sadhan, you need to emphasize on the ways and means of doing bhakti. And in the definition of uttam bhakti, you remember that is a classical definition. You need to emphasize that it is an activity of Krishna. Shilanam, it has to be done. Anushilanam means under some guidance. It has to be anukulyena, it has to be favorable. So anukul. So these are the primary characteristics of uttam bhakti. And the secondary characteristic is in anya abhilashita shunyam, gyan karma adi anavritam. So just remember primary definition of uttam bhakti, sadhan bhakti, vaidi bhakti. Then we are good with all the three definitions of bhakti. So that much if you remember, we are good. We will cover Bhav Bhakti, Prema Bhakti, Raganuga Bhakti later after chapter 15. So need not bother about those three definitions right now. Then in Vedhi Sadhan Bhakti, just now in class 7, we discussed there were three adhikaris, Madhyama, Uttama, Madhyama, and Kanistha. And we discussed that uh, uh, these are graded as depending upon their faith, their shraddha in bhakti, and their knowledge of scriptures. Why knowledge of scriptures we are talking? Because Vedhi means following the scriptures. So who follow the scriptures deeply, who have lot of faith in scriptures deeply, that is a defining characteristics of the adhikari. The top one is known as Uttama, the medium one is known as Madhyama, and the bottom one is known as Kanistha. So that is three adhikaris. Below three adhikaris are Sukritinas, because Sukritinas are not still fully pure devotional service, because it is they have some material desire already there. Jnani also in that list have desire for impersonal liberation. So that is why the Sukritinas are below the adhikaris. They are, but among them, Jnani is the best. So that is what we have covered so far. I'm just moving my mouse here so that you know what in broad nutshell what we have covered. So that gives you a good graphic view of what we have done. This is kind of a recap I'm trying to do for you for last two presentations we have done in for Nectar of Devotion. Now in today's class, we progress our discussion further. We will primarily cover two topics. Bhakti is independent, and 64 limbs of Vedi Bhakti. So Bhakti is independent. This is chapter number 5. And 64 limbs of Bhakti, there is a list given, a long list of 64 items that is given in chapter number 6 of Nectar of Devotion. So that is chapter number of 6 of Nectar of Devotion. Now, you see where we left the discussion last time. We left the discussion last time where we said that pure devotees of Krishna do not even desire mukti or do not even desire liberation. They are so much attached to hearing the pastimes of Krishna. They are so much attached to doing service for Krishna that they don't want even liberation. That is where we left our discussion. Now, to further emphasize on the same theme, that bhakti surpasses mukti, or the devotees, the pure devotees of the Lord, don't even desire liberation. There, the discussion goes a little further, where now Srila Rup Goswami is defining that bhakti is actually independent. Bhakti is independent. Now let us see what does Srila Rup Goswami mean when he says bhakti is independent. So here starts our class for today. So I hope you got a good recap of what we have done so far, and now we are moving to our next class, which is chapter number 5 of Nectar of Devotion, where the primary discussion is that bhakti actually is independent. Now let me give you a little more idea. So this topic is covered in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu from verse number 60 till 71. So a total of 12 verses are there, and in these 12 verses, uh, uh, these are chapter number 5 uh, of Nectar of Devotion. Nectar of Devotion is actually authored by Srila Prabhupada, for those who are new to our class, and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is authored by Srila Rup Goswami. So Srila Prabhupada has written a summary study on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is known as Nectar of Devotion. Now, Srila Prabhupada has titled this chapter number 5 as the purity of devotional service. Purity of devotional service. Now, let me take you back to the previous slide. So, chapter number 5, I am here defining as Bhakti is independent, and Prabhupada has titled as chapter number 5 as the purity of devotional service. Now, let us try to understand what is meant by purity of devotional service. So, when we say purity of devotional service, what Srila Prabhupada is trying to emphasize to us is that bhakti does not depend upon any other process. Bhakti is pure. Pure means it is not dependent upon any other process uh, for somebody to become qualified to perform Vedi Bhakti. For example, I'll explain you what do you mean by purity here once again by giving you an example. If somebody wants to become an engineer in India or maybe in other countries, then that person who wants to become an engineer need to have some qualification, and that qualification might be that he should have passed an exam for 12th standard, and the subject would be mathematics, physics, chemistry. So uh, the process of becoming an engineer is actually dependent upon passing class 12th. So that is what the prerequisite to become an engineer. Similarly, if somebody wants to become a doctor, again he needs to or she needs to pass class 12th, and that class 12th must be passed with biology at least as a subject. That is prerequisite, and maybe they may have also maths or physics like that. So there is some pre-qualification required to become an engineer or a doctor, or similarly we can give an example of a chartered accountant or and so on. So, but for doing Vedi Bhakti, for practicing Vedi Bhakti, there is no such qualification. There are many other spiritual processes, there are many other spiritual paths. For example, Gyan Yoga, for example, Ashtang Yoga, for example, Karma Kand. So each of these spiritual paths has a prerequisite. Ashtang Yoga, Gyan Yoga has a prerequisite. Ashtang Yoga has a prerequisites. Karma Kanda has prerequisites. So what are the prerequisites for Gyan Yoga? If somebody wants to become a Gyan Yogi, then he should have a very peaceful disposition. He should not have a very flickering mind. Should have a very peaceful disposition. Also, he should have a renounced disposition. Renounced disposition means he should not be attracted towards the material things of the world. His senses should be well under control, and also this person should have a very highly developed intellect. Why very highly developed intellect? Because the person is supposed to read uh, books like Upanishads, books like these kind of very esoteric books which describes about spiritual aspects of the Lord and other things. So Gyan Yoga has a prerequisites. Like I mentioned to you, if somebody wants to become an engineer, he should pass class 12th with physics, chemistry, mathematics as prerequisites. Similarly, Ashtang Yoga also has prerequisites. So Ashtang Yoga is something like which is an advanced form of Gyan Yoga. Huh? So in Ashtang Yoga, the practitioner should be fully renounced. Here, there should be in Gyan Yoga, there should be renounced disposition. But here in Ashtang Yoga, the renunciation or the spirit of renunciation should be further, should be still deeper. That is what Ashtang Yogi needs. Uh, in Karma Kanda means we engage in different type of rituals. And if we want to engage in these rituals, there has to be a right time, right place. The ingredients that we use for doing that ritual should be flawless. The mantras that people chant for these occasions should be very, very clear, very devoid of any mispronunciation, and all those things are there. So, what I'm trying to say here is all other paths of spirituality or transcendence like Gyan Yoga, Ashtang Yoga, Karma Kand has prerequisites. But for doing Vedi Bhakti, hmm, but for doing Vedi Bhakti, there is no prerequisite. There is no prerequisite. Only prerequisite that you need for Vedi Bhakti is that you should be a human being. You should not be a cat or dog. You should be a human being. So any human being is qualified for Vedi Bhakti. Maybe even if he's a murderer of so many other people, still, as far as qualification for doing Vedi Bhakti, for performing Vedi Bhakti, that human being is qualified. There is no restriction that he cannot perform Vedi Bhakti uh, because he is not coming from a sannyasi background, he is not peaceful, he is not renounced, he does not have a highly developed intellect, and so on and so forth. Now, what Srila Rup Goswami is mentioning in this particular section, which starts from verse number 60 and continues till verse number 71, he is further elaborating on this theme that any human being is qualified for Vedi Bhakti, where he's explaining to us that birth is not a criteria. Birth means taking birth in a very high family. For example, taking birth in a Brahmanical family, taking birth in a very aristocratic family, like that. So birth is not a criteria. Purity is not a criteria. Purity here means uh, maybe if we commit any sinful activity, or we are driven by lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, and out of these lust, anger, greed, pride, illusion, envy, we commit some sinful activity. So that sinful activity, accidental sinful activity, if we commit, that does not eliminate us or does not make us disqualified to perform Vedi Bhakti. And then proper execution of Varnashram Dharma. Huh? So Varn Ashram. So what are Varn and Ashram? There are four Varnas and four Ashrams. Four Varnas are Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And there are four Ashrams: Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. So each of these ashrams have some prescribed duties to perform. A brahmachari has prescribed duty, a grahastha has prescribed duty, Vanaprastha has prescribed duty, sannyasi has prescribed duty. Similarly, four varnas uh, like Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Like we discussed in Bhagavad Gita, Kshatriya. So Kshatriya is one of the prescribed duties to protect the society, and that is what Arjuna was not doing in Bhagavad Gita, as we discussed. So like that, uh, the point is that if we are following Varnashram Dharma, then proper execution of Varnashram Dharma. So the point is that any human being is qualified for Vedi Bhakti if the person is not properly executing Varnashram Dharma, he is not disqualified for doing Vedi Bhakti. If the person is having some occasional impurities, some sinful activities occasionally, accidentally, that does not disqualify that person from Vedi Bhakti. Similarly, a low birth also does not disqualify any human being from doing Vedi Bhakti. So you can see any human being is qualified for Vedi Bhakti. And there are no hindrances from birth, purity, or proper execution of Varnashram Dhamma. There are no hindrances to any human being for performing Vedi Bhakti. Now I have color coded them because I will be covering all of these themes of birth, purity, and Varnashram Dharma in the coming slides. So just so that you easily follow it, I've just color coded them. So the first slide is, or the next slide is about birth. So what Srila Rup Goswami is doing is he's giving examples, or he's giving references from various Vedic literature. Some of the references are coming in this slide from Srila Rup Goswami, but some of the examples are also coming from Srila Prabhupada. Like for example, the very first bullet that you see, uh, which emphasizes that birth is not a criteria for performing Vaidhi Bhakti. A high birth, taking birth in a very high class family, a Brahmanical family, or a Kshatriya family, or maybe in an aristocratic family, that is not the criteria. So Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati opposed caste Goswamis who claimed their birthright monopoly on bhakti. So what happened? There is some history being given by Srila Prabhupada, where uh, Lord Nityananda. Now I'm coming to this Chaitanya Leela, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, they were two brothers. Both were divinity. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is representative of Lord Krishna himself, and Nityananda Prabhu is representative of Lord Balaram himself. So what happened was that in the family of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, whatever the family members of Lord Nityananda Prabhu, their children, grandchildren, and so on, they came to this opinion that only they are eligible to perform pure devotional service. And that idea was strongly opposed by Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Thakur. And who is Srila Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Thakur? He is the spiritual master of Srila Prabhupada, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So these people who were who were the descendants of Lord Nityanand, they claimed that they are the only Goswami caste, and they are only having birthright monopoly on doing pure devotional service. And Bhakti Siddhant Saraswati Thakur engaged and opposed these kind of thoughts, and it is mentioned in the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that how he defeated these kind of thoughts in the debates which were organized at that time, where he established that taking birth in a high class family is not the qualification for doing bhakti, but bhakti is rather independent of any birth. So that is one reference Srila Prabhupada is giving in the Nectar of Devotion in paragraph number 2 and 3 of chapter number 5. At the same time, Srila Prabhupada also mentions about uh, going to the West, starting this ISKCON movement, and engaging many of these Western people in this bhakti movement. And if you see, if you know by general knowledge also, that in the Western world, the habits that people are engaged with, like eating habits and cleaning habits, maybe they don't take bath every day, they don't eat food offered to the Lord, most of the time they are eating non-vegetarian food stuff, chicken, fish, egg, etc., etc. So they are in that sense uh, not very pure in their living habits, or and eating habits, and so on. But what Prabhupada is mentioning here, that uh, just because their habits were impure doesn't disqualify them for performing Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. So that is another example Srila Prabhupada is giving. And then in paragraph number 4, and paragraph number 5. There are some references Srila Rup Goswami has given, and Srila Prabhupada is repeating those references in Nectar of Devotion. Like, for example, one reference comes from Padma Puran, another one from Skanda Puran, and also one reference is given by Prabhupada from Hari Bhakti Vilas. So, what are these references? These references are from Padma Puran. It says that anyone is qualified to take bath in the month of Magh, and Magh month is typically known in the English calendar as December and January. So what is mentioned here is that just because there are winters, it does not mean that nobody, certain people cannot take bath in that month. Like that, just because a person is born in a low class family or a degraded family, it does not mean that he is not qualified to do Vedi Sadhana Bhakti. Similarly, Skanda Puran, another reference is given where it is mentioned in Skanda Puran, Kashi Khanda portion. So, what is mentioned in Skanda Puran is uh, uh, that even if you are born in a very outcast family, still you can take Vaishnav Diksha. It is possible that you can take Vaishnav Diksha even if you are born in an outcast family. Let me find out that verse where the description is given. Let me read it for you. Yeah. So here in verse number 62 in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, that verse has been quoted by Srila Rupa Goswami. It says, in the country known as Mayur Dhwaja, even the outcasts receive Vaishnava initiation, wearing proper dress, tilak, with beads in their hands and on their necks. They appear to be coming from Vaikuntha and surpass the ordinary Brahmanas. So, like that, this reference is coming from Skanda Puran, where it is being mentioned that even outcast can receive a Vaishnav Diksha. Then there is another reference that comes from Srila Prabhupada. This reference from Hari Bhakti Vilas comes from Srila Prabhupada in Nectar of Devotion, where it is mentioned anyone who is initiated by a bona fide guru as a Vaishnav becomes a Brahmana as much as bell metal turns into gold by the mixture of mercury. So, here, with the help of an analogy, the point being conveyed in this book called Hari Bhakti Vilas. By the way, this Hari Bhakti Vilas is another book that has been written by one of the Goswamis. And this book has been written by Sanatan Goswami, who is the elder brother of Srila Rup Goswami. So, in Hari Bhakti Vilas, there are many practical activities given on how to perform devotional service. So, that is the book. So, in that book, Srila Sanatan Goswami is mentioning that any person who has been initiated by a bona fide guru as Vaishnava, he becomes a Brahmana. Brahmana means he acquires the qualities of Brahmana. Hmm. He uh, uh, and the analogy is given is uh, just like there is a bell metal. The bell metal in Hindi or in Sanskrit is known as Kamsa. So this is a metal which has does not have much value, but people who know that chemistry and they know that trick, when this metal is mixed with mercury, this metal is converted into gold. Like that, if a person, even if who is born as a low class, but has been initiated by a Vaishnava, as a Vaishnava by a bona fide spiritual master, becomes a Brahmana. So, like that, there are references given to justify that even if somebody has a low birth, uh, that does not disqualify him to practice Vedhi Sadhan Bhakti. Now, reading these two bullet points, the Skanda Puran one and the Hari Bhakti Vilas, where even an outcast can receive Vaishnav Diksha and person initiated as Vaishnav becomes Brahman. Like that, these might give somebody an impression that, oh, just take initiation and the problem is solved. So, in order to balance that kind of a point, Srila Rup Goswami immediately in the next verse, in 63rd verse, mentions that simply initiation does not elevate someone to a high class Brahmana. one has to discharge the regulative principles. So just don't think that I have uh, become a Dikshit, I have become a Dikshit devotee, I have acquired initiation from a bona fide spiritual master, then everything is done, no more activities are required. But what it is saying is, Srila Rupa Goswami is saying is that don't think that simply you have been given an initiation by a bona fide guru, the story is ended. No, actually the story starts. Initiation actually means initiating, it is starting up, it is not ending, it is not end of the story. So after taking initiation, you need to become even more sincere and even more serious, that you need to discharge all the angas, all the limbs of bhakti with utmost attention, with utmost seriousness. So that is why Srila Rup Goswami, immediately after quoting this verse number 62 in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he immediately balances that simply initiation does not elevate someone to a high class brahmana. One has to discharge the regulative principles, like that. So this is the references being given and the way the discussion has happened in Bhakti Samrat Sindhu together with Nectar of Devotion on the aspect that birth is not a hindrance for Vedi Sadhan Bhakti. Now we discuss about purity. Purity means that we are performing our bhakti, and somehow we default somewhere here and there. We were supposed to chant our rounds, we could not chant our rounds properly, or we were supposed to follow four regulative principles where we were supposed to follow no intoxication, but somehow we accidentally or out of our uh, maybe some occasional intense desire, maybe we engaged in some smoking or maybe some drinking alcohol, etc. Or maybe we took some uh, food products like onion, garlic, or uh, maybe some meat product or some eggs and things like that. Now if it was not bhakti and there were some other process of self realization we were following, like we might be following jnana yoga or karma kanda or ashtang yoga, etc., then if we commit some impure act, huh, then in order to uh, regain purity we need to do some prayashchit. Other process of self realization depends upon purity, that is we need to do prayashchit, we need to do some prayashchit activity, and there are activities defined what are we expected to do in other processes. But if we are doing any accidental sins in bhakti, then we need not do any separate prayashchit. We need not do something that we need to perform a yajna, we need to invite 500 brahmanas and feed them, or we need to go to a pilgrimage to do that prayashchit. No, the prayashchit for bhakti or sin committed in bhakti is bhakti itself. What it means is that we come back to our original state of performing Vedi Sadhan Bhakti, whatever rules, regulation we were expected to perform as part of Vedi Sadhan Bhakti, and we once again start to do those rules and regulation with utmost sincerity. If we made some mistake, okay, we made a mistake, we recognize it, we repent for it, we have a little uh, a guilty feeling about it, but in order to do that prayashchit, the prayashchit is bhakti only. We once again start following the four regulative principles more seriously, start chanting our rounds even more seriously, and do our sadhana even more nicely and seriously. That is the only prayashchit we can do. That is the prayashchit for accidental sins in bhakti is prayashchit bhakti only. And this is what Srila Rup Goswami now supports from a reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, which is verse from an 11th canto. Here, Srila Rup Goswami is saying, this verse from Bhagavatam says, a devotee must be steady in bhakti and follow the regulative principles without deviation. For a person who is qualified for pure bhakti, failure to perform the indispensable limbs of bhakti and performing the actions of karma or jnana are both faults. What it means is that actually what is a fault in bhakti, what is a sin in bhakti? The sin in bhakti is not following the rules and regulations of bhakti. That is actually the sin in bhakti. But if we are doing it steadily without deviation, then we need not worry about any other accidental sin that might happen. So that is how Srila Rupa Goswami confirms and proves with references from the scriptures that Vedi Sadhan Bhakti is not dependent on purity. If there is some accidental sin, then Bhakti is the only prashchit we need to do. That is what he's saying. Now moving to the third item. So we covered birth, purity, and then coming to the third item, which is Varnashram Dharma. So bhakti is not dependent on the proper execution of Varnashram Dharma. Varnashram Dharma means prescribed duties according to our Varna and our Ashrama. So our Varna, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, that is four Varnas, and Ashram means Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanprastha, and Sannyas. So typically, we would either fall in Grahastha Ashram or at the most maybe in Vanprastha Ashram. Generally, in the life today, in the community today, we have very few brahmacharis and very few sannyasis. Largely, the devotional community is now comprising of majorly of grahasthas and to some extent vanaprasthas, or people who are in retired life. So for grahasthas, there are rules and regulations given. There are prescribed duties given. Grahasthas need to do this. All prescribed duties are given. Similarly, for Vanprasthas, also prescribed duties are given. Like that, if you fall under any of these categories like Brahmachari, uh, I would say, sorry, uh, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, uh, typically we would fall maybe either in administrative class or maybe uh, in the mercantile class, or maybe some people might fall in the soldier class. Like that, maybe we might be falling in one of those varnas typically. Or maybe if we are teachers, then probably we are falling in the Brahmanical class. Then each of these varnas and each of these ashramas have prescribed duties given in the scriptures. So if somebody is not, generally the bhaktas, generally the devotees like to execute those duties of varna and ashrama mainly to establish proper example in the society. For example, if I am in a grahastha ashram, then I need to follow the, or I need to fulfill the duties of an husband. My wife, if she's also a devotee, then she also needs to fulfill the duties of a wife. As a father, I need to fulfill my duties. As an employee of a company, I need to fulfill my duties. Like that, we need to fulfill our prescribed duties that are expected from us as part of our varna and ashrama. But if for some reasons we are not fulfilling one or two or some of our duties with not very proper mindset, then what Srila Rupa Goswami is saying, that it is bhakti is not dependent upon proper execution of varnashram dharma. If we are doing Vedi bhakti, then that is properly, then we may actually, if there are some occasional lapses in our performing of duties of varnashram dharma, then that is okay, that is acceptable. We are not committing a big fault there. So here he gives evidences from Srimad Bhagavatam, from the first canto, fifth chapter, verse number 17. What it says is, if one takes shelter of Krishna but gives up prescribed duties, then what is the loss? But on the other hand, if one fully executes one's duties without worshipping Krishna, then what is the gain? So here you can see the emphasis on that if we are performing our worship to Krishna and for some reason there are some mispoints or somewhere we are missing on our doing our prescribed duties as part of our varnashram dharma, then we need not worry too much about it. If we are worshipping Krishna with all our heart and soul, then we are not at fault if there are some occasional lapses in varnashram dharma. Similarly, another evidence he gives, anyone who takes full shelter of me, this is the verse spoken by Lord Krishna, 67th verse. So here Krishna is telling to Uddhava, anyone who takes my shelter in full surrender and follows my instruction, giving up all ordinary occupational duties or rituals, is to be considered the first class devotee. is to be considered first class devotee. So again, uh, Rup Goswami is giving a reference from Srimad Bhagavatam where he's emphasizing taking full shelter of Lord Krishna and emphasizing over what? Emphasizing over occupational duties or rituals. Like that, there are more references which are mentioned here in the next slide. So another reference from Srimad Bhagavatam, where in verse number 68, uh, Karbhajan Muni is telling to King Nimi. So these are some conversations from Srimad Bhagavatam. Here, Karbhajan Muni is uh, giving instruction to King Nimi. He's saying that anyone who has taken full shelter of Lord Mukunda owes neither duties of Varnashram nor obligations to the Devatas, sages, forefathers, general living beings, and so on. So here you see Prabhupada has given an elaborate description of what do you mean by obligation to forefathers, sages, and so on in paragraph 13, 14, and 15. Here Srila Prabhupada is elaborating that anyone who takes birth becomes obligated to different kind of living entities. And who are these? Great sages, ancestors like our forefathers, living entities, and family, friends, society members, and so on, even animals. Why? Because each of these living entities like forefathers, sages, people of society, our friends, our relatives, even animals like cows and so on, actually we become indebted to them. We become indebted to them because we receive benefit from them. What kind of benefits? For example, we read books written by sages, like for example we read Srimad Bhagavatam, or we read Valmiki Ramayana. Now these books have been written by sages like Valmiki, or sages like Vyasadeva. So they are giving us knowledge. They are giving us knowledge of God. So we become indebted to them. We become indebted to them because we received some knowledge, we received some benefit from these people. Similarly, forefathers. So we take birth in a family. We take advantage of the facilities available in the family. Even when our parents pass away or our forefathers, ancestors pass away, they leave behind their inheritance for us. They kindly leave behind their inheritance for us. So we take advantage, we enjoy the inheritance, the house, the property, the assets. So we are indebted to our forefathers. We become indebted to our forefathers just because we have taken a birth in a family. So we need to repay that birth. We need to repay that debt to our forefathers, our sages. Like that, we take so much benefits from so many people from society. We receive our education from our teachers. We receive salary from our employers. Like that, even animals, sometimes we may uh, sometimes we may become passengers to a carriage where a horse have been pulling that carriage, or a food that we eat have been grown in a field which was uh, plowed by a oxen or a cow. We receive milk from a cow, like that. So we become indebted to so many people, so many living entities in a society, that we have a debt towards them. And there are prescribed duties in Varnashram Dharma where a person has to repay that debt. For example, when the ancestors pass away, then we need to offer them prasad, which is known as pindadan. We do pinda. Pinda means we are offering prasad to our ancestors because they have left some inheritance for us. We owe so much to them. But here there is an evidence from Srimad Bhagavatam where Karbhajan Muni is telling King Nimi that anyone who has taken full shelter of Lord Mukunda owes neither duties of Varnashram nor obligations to the Devatas, sages, forefathers, general living being, and so on. So if you are worshipping Lord Mukunda, Lord Krishna, then all your debts of the society, of sages, of forefathers are taken care. So that is the potency of bhakti that you can see as mentioned in the scriptures. Similarly, you can see there's an evidence in Bhagavad Gita which you already know. There's a famous verse where Lord Krishna says in the end of Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharman Parityajya He's telling to Arjuna, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam braj aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshishyami ma shuchah. So here again Lord Krishna is saying that, my dear Arjun, right from the beginning when I started to speak Bhagavad Gita to you, I have spoken so many things to you. I have spoken about Karma Yoga. I have spoken about Karma Kanda. I have spoken about Jnana Yoga. I have spoken about Ashtang Yoga. Don't worry. Don't feel bothered. Don't feel confused. Sarva dharman parityajya. Just abandon all these rules, regulations, dharma I have just mentioned to you. Simply surrender unto me, and I will take care of all your sins. Don't fear about it. So we have that very famous reference, uh, s- uh, right, coming from one of our favorite books, Bhagavad Gita, conveying the same thought. Again, evidence from Agastya Samhita is there, where it is mentioned. This is verse number 70. So here it is mentioned, just as the scriptural rules and regulations do not apply to a liberated person, the ritualistic principles in the Vedic supplements are not required for a person engaged in the service of Lord Ram. Ritualistic principles in the Vedic supplements, like we have Vedas, and in the Vedas there are supplements which define a lot of rituals. If we don't follow those rituals in the Vedic supplements, they are not required for whom? They are not required for a person in service of Lord Ram. And there is no difference between Lord Ram and Lord Krishna. So there is another evidence that is coming from Agastya Samhita. Similarly, there is one more evidence from Srimad Bhagavatam which emphasizes that Krishna washes the sins of surrendered devotees. So even if you are doing some accidental sin, although it is not tendency of a devotee to commit a sin, but somehow in some circumstances, circumstantially or in an emergency situation, there might be some act of sin from a devotee. But Lord Krishna is giving this assurance in this Srimad Bhagavatam verse that Krishna washes the sins of surrendered devotees. So those devotees who have surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, Lord Krishna himself takes care of those sins. So like that, we have understood what we have understood, that bhakti is independent. Purity of bhakti means bhakti is not dependent upon any external process. Bhakti is causeless. Bhakti is dependent on bhakti itself. So if you are doing bhakti, then it produces more bhakti. If you produce more bhakti, then it produces even more bhakti. So bhakti is dependent only on bhakti, and bhakti is not dependent upon any other external process. Like jnana, karma, and ashtanga yoga processes do depend upon some external qualification. Bhakti is not, or Vedi, or performing Vedi sadhan bhakti is not dependent upon any other external qualification. So now we have covered chapter number 5 of Nectar of Devotion, the primary theme of which was bhakti is independent, or bhakti is pure, devoid of any or dependence on any other external process. Now we are moving in this slide to the next chapter, which is 64 limbs of bhakti. So as I discussed with you in the beginning of the class, that we have discussed about Uttam Bhakti. Uttam Bhakti definition is about Shilanam, that means it is an activity for Krishna. Then from Uttam Bhakti, we move to Sadhan Bhakti. Sadhan Bhakti, I gave you this hint that you should remember this word Sadhan. Sadhan means, ways and means. And Sadhan here, actually, ways and means are our senses and our mind. So engaging our mind and senses in doing some activity for Krishna, that is the definition of Sadhan Bhakti. Huh? So now Rup Goswami describes how do we need to engage our senses and our mind in service to Krishna. So these are the practical aspects of devotional service. And chapter 6, Srila Prabhupada is titling as How to Discharge Devotional Service. So this is covered mainly in verse number 72 to 96. These are actually lists. List means only listing 64 items, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that, 64 items. There's a long list. So chapter 6 describes only the list. but does not elaborate upon them. Hmm. The elaboration starts from chapter number 7 onwards, which we will take in our next class. But just before we move to the next class, we look into that list. I'll just give you that brief list. I will read out to you. But before we move to the list, uh, a list of 64 prominent bhakti practices are given. And from where this list is coming? This list is coming from Hari Bhakti Vilas, the same book which I just now mentioned to you short while ago, written by elder brother of Rup Goswami, and whose name is Sanatan Goswami. So Sanatan Goswami has given lots and lots of bhakti practices in this book called Hari Bhakti Vilas. And the list now we are going to read in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is the list of 64 prominent bhakti practices. So Rup Goswami, what he has done, he went through all those lists as given in Hari Bhakti Vilas, only picked up few of them, 64 of them, and have listed in chapter numbers in the verse number 72 to 96. Now we are talking about limbs of bhakti. Limbs means the angas, the specific activities of bhakti. Now activities can be classified into two categories. What are those categories? One category of activity is that which has subcategories also. Like for example, DT worship. DT worship means worshipping the Lord. Now DT worship is a very elaborate exercise. When we do DT worship, there are different activities in DT worship. So devotional actions with internal divisions. So this is one type of activity. But then another type of activity is only one single activity which does not have any subdivisions. Only one devotional action. For example, standing when DT procession comes. Now, for example, there is a Rath Yatra going on the street, and we are sitting somewhere in a restaurant or maybe nearby. We are sitting, but as soon as we see a procession of a Lordship Jagannath is coming, then out of respect we stand up, and that is an limb or an anga of bhakti. That is one activity of bhakti we are expected to perform, and we need to show respect to the procession that is coming. So there are no subdivisions to these activities, only one devotional action is there. So uh, now we are going to understand the or going to read or just get acquainted with the list. So before we get acquainted to the list, we need to understand how that list is being organized. So 64 items are there. So 64 items are classified, 20 as primary of importance and 44 additional items are given. 20 are of primary importance and 44 are additional items. Now out of these 20, first 10 are activities to be accepted, which is pravritti, and next 20 are next 10 items are activities which are to be avoided. So this is something like do's. 1 to 10 are do's, 11 to 20 are don'ts. Like when we go to the doctor, so the doctor says do this but don't do this. Like if you have cough and cold, he will tell you that okay, drink warm water and don't eat ice cream. Yeah. So do's and don'ts. So 20 items of primary importance, out of which first 10 are do's and next 10 are don'ts. Then 44 additional items are there, and these are items of sadhana, sadhan, which are 21 to 59 in the list from item number 21 to item number 59. And then uh, 60 to 64, maybe I made a mistake here. 60 to 64, 60 to 64, these are the most effective items. So you see, among these 44 items, the last 5 items in that list, Rup Goswami is saying that these are most effective items, and we should not forget to perform these effective items when we are doing Vaidhi Sadhan Bhakti. Now let us look into the list. So the list is first 10 items which are do's. These are Guru Pad Ashraya, which means taking shelter of a Guru. We need to accept a Guru. If we are doing Vedi Sadhan Bhakti, it is very much recommended. Then Krishna Dikshadi Shikshanam. So once we take shelter of a Guru, Then the next step is we receive initiation, learning to perform bhakti. We receive initiation from that guru, and when we take shelter of the guru, we receive initiation from guru. We also hear from the guru and learn how to perform bhakti. Then Vishrambhena Guru Seva. After taking initiation, we need to do some service to the Guru with respect and love. Then fourth item is Sadhu Vartma Anuvartanam, which means following scriptural rules in the footsteps of the Acharyas. So we have our Guru, we have our spiritual master, but before our Guru also there were more spiritual masters were there who are known as Acharyas. So they might have written books, they might have given guidelines, rules, regulation. So we need to follow the scriptural rules in the footsteps of the acharyas. Then Sadharma Pracha. We should make some inquiry from the Guru how to advance in bhakti. Then Bhogadi Tyaga Krishnasya Hetave. Giving up material enjoyment for Krishna. So sometimes when we are devotee, when we are performing bhakti for Krishna, we may have to sacrifice something which we like. Maybe we like some television program, but if we are supposed to go for some bhakti program or some activity of bhakti, we may have to leave that program behind and we have to give some time for Krishna. Similarly, uh, if we don't like something and we have to do it for Krishna, we have to accept that activity also. Bhog adi tyagah krishnasya hetave. Then nivaso dwarka adau va gangader api sannidhau, which means residing in holy places like Dwarka or Vrindavan or near the banks of river Ganga. Vyavahareshu sarveshu yavad arthanu vartita. What it means is accepting only what is necessary for the body, dealing with material world only as necessary. So it is not that we have some requirement of our in our life. Don't try to increase those necessary of the body unnecessarily. And similarly, don't get engaged in the material world too much. Deal with the people of material world only as much it is necessary. Don't get too much involved in the life of the people in this material world. Hari Vasar Sammana, which means observing days like Ekadashi, fasting on days like Ekadashi, etc. Then Dhatri Ashwathadi Gauravam. Dhatri means Amla tree and Ashwath means banyan tree. So worshipping sacred trees like banyan and Amalaki. Now in our tradition we worship Tulsi Devi, Tulsi Maharani. So these are 10 activities which are the do's, preliminary necessaries which we need to do. And I have highlighted first three of them in pink in a different color because Rup Goswami later on says after describing that list is that among these 20 items, the first three items are the most important ones. Now we go to the don'ts. Sangatyago vidurena bhagavad vimukhair janay. Not associating with those who are opposed to the Lord. Shishyadi ananu bandhitvam. Not being attached to making too many disciples. So sometimes there are spiritual teachers in our organization. So it is an instruction for the spiritual masters, the gurus, that one should not become too much fascinated that they should have lots of followers. They should not be carried away that they are having so many thousands of disciples, so many hundreds of disciples. They should not be attached in making too many disciples. Then Maha Arambhadi Anudyamaha, which means not being enthusiastic for huge undertakings. Like for example, we think that okay, if I build a very glamorous and a very big opulent temple for the lordships, then it will be really a good, remarkable uh, certificate to my bhakti. So here Rup Goswami is warning against it, that don't take too huge undertaking that you actually forget your bhajan and forget your sadhana. We will elaborate on each of these items in our coming classes, but this is just a list. Bahugrantha kalabhyasa vyakhya vada vivarjanam. Not studying many useless books to earn livelihood or to defeat others in useless arguments. So don't fall into this mentality of that reading many books, or reading even devotional books for the purpose of earning livelihood. Like people might read Bhagavatam and then make it a business, that please organize my katha, I will do a very glamorous katha, and please offer me 50,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees because I am actually very popular, and so on. Don't get into that. And also, don't engage in unless useless arguments just to prove that you are superior to others. Similarly, vyavahare api akarpanyam, not feel miserable in any material circumstances. So don't become hopeless. Don't feel miserable. Whatever may be the circumstances in your life, always remaining hopeful that Krishna will protect me. So vyavahare api akarpanyam. Akarpanyam is the word coming from Karpanya dosh. Like we have a verse in Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Karpanya dosho pahata subhava, which Arjun asked. So I have been overtaken by this miserly weakness. So please instruct me. I am your disciple now. So that is where the word Akarpanyam is coming from. Shokadi avasha vartita, not lamenting in loss or other extreme emotions. Anya Devan Avagya, not disrespecting Devatas. So, since we are, our most worshipable Lord is Lord Krishna, it does not mean that we become disrespectful to the demigods like Lord Ganesh, Lord Indra, Lord Chandra, Lord Surya, Lord Hanuman. We don't become disrespectful to the Devatas. Bhuta Anudvega Daita, we should not give trouble to other living beings. We should be very gentle to other living beings. Even if it is a small ant, we should be very gentle. Seva nam aparadhanam udbhava abhava karita, avoiding offenses in deity worship and chanting. So we have deity worship, Vigraha Seva, and we have Nam Seva. We avoid offenses in doing both of them. Krishna tad bhakta vidvesha vinindadi asahishnuta. Uh, Asahishnutta. What it means is, we should not tolerate blasphemy of Krishna and his devotees by those who hate them. We should not tolerate the blasphemy of Krishna. If somebody is criticizing Krishna, best we try to defeat the person by our logical arguments, or even if we are not able to do so, we should leave that place. We should put hands on our ears, and we should either leave that place or try to engage with that person and defeat his logic and arguments. Similarly for his devotees, Krishna's devotees also. So these are the don'ts. Now comes the 44 items. I will quickly read them. Marking body with Vaishnav Tilak, marking one's body with Krishna's names, wearing garlands offered to the deity. So we have garlands that is being offered to the deity, and when the pujari gives that garland, we should wear it as a mercy of the Lord. Then dancing before the deity. So in our ISKCON temples or in Gaudiya Vaishnav temples, when you will go, then you will find that in the temples there are mridanga drums are going on, kirtan is being sung, and people are dancing. So dancing before the deity, bowing down before the deity or guru, that is also a devotional service. Standing up to see the Lord. So if we are sitting in the temple, suddenly the curtain opens up, then we need to stand up to pay respect to the Lord. Following the deity in procession. So if there is a procession of the deity coming out from the temple, and we are uh, inattentive, we are sitting somewhere, we need to stand up to pay our respects. Visiting the Lord's temple, circumambulating the temple or dham. So when we go to the temple, we take parikrama of the temple. We go to a holy place, we take parikrama of the holy place. That is a part of a devotional activity. Worshipping the deity, personal menial service to the deity. We do some personal menial service, maybe clean the floor in the temple, or maybe make some garland for the deity. uh, like that, we need to do some personal menial service to the deity, maybe offer some ornaments to the deity, like that. Singing for the deity, we need to sing some good nice songs, Vaishnav bhajan. Singing in a group of devotees, chanting of the holy names, submissive appeal. Submissive appeals means I'm feeling very uh, helpless. Please, oh my Lord, kindly help me, kindly attract my mind towards your lotus feet, like that, making submissive appeals to the deity. Reciting notable prayers. There are wonderful prayers given in Bhagavatam and many other Vaishnava literature. We recite those prayers. Tasting Mahaprasad of the Lord, tasting Charanamrit of the Lord. Charanamrit means uh, in the temple, when the bathing of the deity is done in the morning, then there is a water accumulated. So we taste that Charanamrit of the Lord available in the temples as prasad. Then smelling the incense and flowers offered to the Lord, touching the lotus feet of the deity, seeing the deity with devotion, seeing the arti and the festivals of the Lord. Then the another 22 items of these: hearing about Krishna, Shravanam, awaiting the mercy of the Lord, remembering the Lord, meditating on the Lord, acting as a servant of the Lord, thinking of the Lord as our friend, offering oneself to the Lord, offering the best items of the items to the Lord. Maybe there is some favorite item of ours, and then giving that favorite item to the Lord, making all efforts for the Lord, best of our efforts for the Lord, surrendering to the Lord, serving tulasi plant, then studying the scriptures, like what you all people are doing in these classes, writing quizzes, studying books, living in the holy place like Mathura, serving the devotees, maybe serving the devotees, offering them prasad and helping them like that in any activity, holding festivals as per one's capacity, observing Vrat in the Kartik month, observing Janmashtami and other important occasions, Ram Navami, Narsing Chaturdashi, etc., Radha Ashtami, like that. Then having faith and affection for the deity, relishing Bhagavatam in the association of devotees, associating with like-minded, affectionate, superior devotees, hmm, and chanting the holy names in a group of devotees, and living in the area of Mathura. So in this list, you see the last 5 items I have uh, marked with purple color. So these are the 5 most effective items that Rup Goswami later on mentioned in this Bhakti Samrat Sindhu. And there is a separate chapter that Prabhupada has dedicated on these 5 items in this book, Nectar of Devotion. So that's where the list goes on. As I said, last 5 items, these are the most important. And 64 items include all activities of body, senses, and mind in Lord's service. And now scriptural evidences will be provided for authenticity of all these items, or as many items as possible. So the next coming 5-6 classes, we will elaborate in detail on each of these activities, go into much more detail, and give you an explanation of how practically a devotional service or bhakti is performed uh, in our lives. So with that, I would like to bring this class to a conclusion. Uh, all glories to the Nectar of Devotion, all glories to Bhakti Samrat Sindhu, all glories to Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Any questions, any takeaways and comments, maybe we can discuss now. Thank you very, very much for your patience and attention. Really appreciate. Yes. Now we are open for discussion. Let me know if you have any questions. I hope the class this time was relatively easier, and any feedback on that,
I
specifically
agree
from
with you.
Pradeep ji. From Pradeep ji. Uh, so did
It
I?
was it was really a little easier than the before.
Okay, I'm very, very much relieved by hearing those words from you. Okay. So any questions devotees have? So meanwhile, let me see if I can welcome the other people.
Yeah, I'm
Vanaja
going to hang
Mataji.
in.
Okay.
I'm going to
Vanaja.
hang in until the end.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. Vanaja Mataji, Hare Krishna, welcome. Nand Kishore Prabhu, what was your experience, Prabhu? You are joining us for the first time. You find it easy? You find it useful? Uh, did,
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. It's a really wonderful class, Prabhu. I feel this is the taking through advanced level, like into next level.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Reading
yeah,
scriptures dedicatedly and seriously, systematically.
correct.
certainly is a activity not beginners generally do, but sometimes after they have spent some time in the movement, they do. I'm happy that you found it useful. Thank you very much. Any question or
Thank you
any
so much.
comment you have, please feel free to ask, or other devotees also, if they have any questions or doubts. I hope this was relatively easy. We are not covering any very difficult subject.
Hare Krishna.
हाँ प्रभु जी बताइए. Yes.
As usual, गुरु कृपा. आज तो काफी कुछ समझ में आया. तो यही है कि भक्ति, जो रास्ता है भक्ति का, वो सुपीरियर है ज्ञान से और कर्म से.
That is the best. Yes.
तो उसको भक्ति को फिर हमने पकड़ना है, ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंस देनी है.
यही उद्देश्य था रूप गोस्वामी जी का भी. उन्होंने जो बुक लिखी उनका पर्पस यही था टू एस्टैब्लिश द सुपीरियरिटी ऑफ भक्ति ओवर अदर ट्रांसेंडेंटल other process of transcendence.
जी.
That's what he's trying to do, not only giving his writings in the form of a book, but also substantiating those arguments that he's presenting by quoting scriptures. He's giving references from the scriptures. So I'm not saying Rup Goswami is not simply saying by his own mind and knowledge. He's actually quoting from the scriptures. And ample references he's giving from different. Even chapter number 4 is completely dedicated to references. Where he's saying that devotee is not interested in mukti. Devotee is only interested in the seva of the Lord, in the hearing Shravan Kirtan of the Lord. That's what the devotee is only interested. And then you don't need any other rituals, doing your prescribed duty of Varnasrama Dharma, although the devotee does it because to establish example in the society. They don't run away from their duties, but occasional, if they are missing on certain things in terms of their prescribed duties, that is not a fault. So like that, you can see how glorious, easy, and effective and ultimate is the process of pure devotional service. So that's what you can see.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Can you please quickly explain what is the meaning of mukti?
Mukti means becoming free from material world, material anxiety.
That doesn't mean go back to Vrindavan?
That is the highest level of mukti. That is the topmost level of mukti. So if you see our previous classes, where we have explained 5 types of mukti, and these 5 types of mukti are sarshti, samipya, sarupya, salokya, and then ekatvam. So these are 5 types of mukti, and among these 5 types of mukti, the devotee actually does not like to have any of those. Although among these 5 types, 4 types are not anti-devotional. 4 types are within the purview of devotional service only, pure bhakti. But pure devotee only wants the service to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna in Golok Dham Vrindavan. So Salokya Mukti means getting the same planet as the Lord. Sarshti means getting the same kind of opulence as the Lord. Samipya means becoming a personal associate of the Lord. Sarupya means getting a body or a form which is same as the form of the Lord. And then there is another mukti called Ekatvam. Ekatvam means becoming one with the Lord. So that what devotee does not like at all. That is anti-devotional. Saying that I have become one with the Lord, I have become equal with the Lord. That is the anti-devotional sentiment, because bhakti means a servant and a master. That is what bhakti means.
Back to Godhead, is that mukti or difference?
Back to Godhead is also mukti, but that's what I'm saying. It is the topmost level of mukti. You not only get freed from the material world, but you get to the spiritual world, and that too in the topmost place. That is what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Only one point, Prabhu. I would like to ask only one point. So, as a devotee, you mean to say even that also back to Godhead also should not expect, or
Yeah,
that we can
as a devotee, only asks for loving service of the Lord.
okay.
That's what the devotee only asks for.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then he's even go to hell if there you can find association of devotees and Krishna Katha. He doesn't have any problem going to hell even.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Prabhu.
Not to say that we are bound to go to hell, but that is to emphasize the
Yes.
point that how dearly he wants to hear Krishna Katha, how dearly he wants to serve the Lord. That's what the point of emphasis. Yeah. Okay. Good questions,
Thank you,
Prabhuji.
Prabhu.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Okay. Yes, Mataji.
About the initiation process, does the guru choose the disciple or the disciple chooses his guru?
Well, the disciple aspire to become initiated from a guru, from a spiritual master, and then the guru tests the disciple whether he's qualified or not, and then the guru choose the disciple. Choose the disciple means he agrees to give initiation to the disciple. So what the process of initiation typically in our movement, ISKCON movement, is that we need to do 16 rounds of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We need to do that chanting. Then we need to follow the 4 regulative principles like that. And if we are doing that maybe for a sufficient period of time, for example 6 months or 1 year, then through the person whom you have, from with whom or through whom you have connected to the movement, to this, you can approach to that person and ask that person that I am interested in taking initiation from XYZ spiritual master. So there is a list of spiritual master in ISKCON movement whom you can select, you can feel attracted towards, and you find that that guru is actually, I'm very much inspired to hear from this person. We feel very much inspired to from the purity of that person, like that. And then uh, through that person you can approach that spiritual master and request for initiation. So there is a process of giving a letter of recommendation like that, and that's how you can fulfill that activity. Yes.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Guruji.
Yes, Prabhuji.
What I had gathered some from higher devotees, that we have a choice to reach to Guru, but Guru decides whom to accept or not.
Yeah. So that is that. It is like that only. We have a choice means we aspire. I want. I
Ji,
want that such a person accept me as his disciple or her disciple. Uh, but then ultimately it depends upon the
ji.
guru whether he or she accepts us or not.
Now, so it's Guru's choice more than
Yeah.
the
Yeah. We
disciple's
aspire,
choice.
and he decides.
So I can.
And he decides.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Guru Kripa is more important.
Correct. Yes.
So rather than my efforts, Guru Kripa is superior and more important.
Yeah, our efforts has to be there because we need to do our uh, chanting, we need to follow the 4 regulative principles, and then
Ji,
actually, yeah.
Ji,
So
Guruji.
you can hear from many other, you are coming to the classes, our classes, but at the same time I'm sure that you might be also hearing from other devotees also through internet, through maybe television or YouTube, like that. From time to time I also keep on sharing some lectures through WhatsApp group,
Ji.
uh, like that. So my spiritual master's name is His Holiness Indradyumna Swami Maharaj.
Ji.
So from time to time I am also going to share with you some of his activities. Like recently I went to attend his Vyas Puja ceremony, and I know some of the devotees in this group also through internet managed to attend that ceremony. So like that, if there are any occasions like that, I'm not saying that you need to attend only my spiritual master's ceremony, but any other opportunity you get, you make a point that you try to attend those ceremonies, experience, maybe if possible, get an opportunity to talk to these very elevated devotees that are there in our movement, and
Ji.
do your own due diligence and endeavor uh, as much as possible to make a connection, to make a impression about those people. So yes.
Ji Guruji, yeah. Fortunately, I had a chance to before I reached to you, and I feel this is my final sort of destination. But most of the gurus have been talking same thing basically.
Yeah.
Most of the sectors, with some their individual trademarks that
Yeah.
you
So
have to say this
so
or you
you
have to do this and all that.
so they will talk
But
the same thing.
the essence which I found, whatever little knowledge and whatever the blessings of my different gurus, so to say, I mean, different sectors, that
We lost your voice, Prabhuji.
but I'm enjoying your classes
My
the
good fortune,
most.
Prabhuji. Thank you very much. Thank you
No,
very much.
really, I mean, this is the fact.
But I am
My
not
perspective.
qualified to give initiation, by the way.
No, that is a different story.
Yeah.
Because
So
I
if you,
don't feel I will reach to that stage. But
yeah, yeah.
I'm happy as a
I also don't feel.
trustee.
Yeah.
Ji,
I also don't feel that I will
I'm,
become an initiating guru in ISKCON anytime in my life.
Ji. No, why not with the attitude you have, with the aptitude you have, with the heart you have, the golden heart, with the feeling you have for your students. You really get us absorbed into you. So,
Okay.
you have still a lot of time. So who knows? You know.
Well, okay. I'm
Yeah.
happy to focus on other items than become an initiating guru in ISKCON. Many more books to read, and possibly, if the Lord permits, to teach also to others. So there are other activities I'm more interested in. Anyway, but
Ji.
any other question from other devotees? Or
Thank you, Guruji.
yes,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Dandavad.
Krishna. Yeah. Okay, then if there are no questions, I once again thanks everyone for their very kind attention. And now comes the most easiest part, to understand how to discharge practical devotional service. So next 4 or 5 classes are certainly going to become easy. So please do join us. Next week it will be a break. I would not be in the city. I will be traveling on Radha Ashtami day to Belgaum to attend that festival. And I remember Anupama Mataji making a request in the past to present something on Radha Ashtami. So maybe not next Sunday, but I probably might present something on Radha Ashtami the following Sunday. So expect a Radha Ashtami class in the coming time, and also on coming Wednesday, which is 31st of August, where there will be a holiday of Ganesh Chaturthi also. I will be making a presentation on Srila Prabhupada's life, a small class in Hindi on Wednesday at 5 p.m. So if you are available, if you are free, please do join to listen the nectarian pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. That is mainly, I am actually delivering it mainly for Pradeep ji, who likes very much Prabhupada pastimes. So, but for all others also. So please do join us. So with that, I would like to bring this class to a rest. Thanks a lot, everyone. Once again, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Krishna. All glories to our Srila Prabhupada and all glories to our Guruji.
Maharaj, Hare Krishna. All glories to Kartar
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna.